Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Big year for our country. It's, let's see, the 250th anniversary. Coming up July 4th, I think that it'll be celebrated from shining sea to shining sea, as they say. And part of that, as I'm sure that you guys are well aware of, are annual fireworks demonstrations all over the place. I love going to them. Most of the time, if you make it through the crowd, there's one place around where I live that's it's so tedious to go to. I just don't go there. So I have a special place. I go on the river. You guys have seen me on my boat. And I just kind of park beneath them and watch them burst over my head. What a lot of people don't realize about fireworks, though, is that though they are absolutely gorgeous to see, they are inherently dangerous. And, you know, there's tons of stories out there about people blowing fingers off and, you know, losing their eyesight. But what if I told you a story today about someone that was creating fireworks at their home, and it wasn't just fingers or eyesight or even a limb that someone lost, but a life. As a matter of fact, a couple of lives. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, did you used to take the kids to fireworks for July the 4th every year? Was that something that you guys did, or did
no?
You just
here's the thing, and this is the part that my children and we did things together like that for 4th of July, but I was hosting them with the radio stations I worked with.
Oh my gosh!
So every 4th of July event, every Santa Claus thing, every major event, every major holiday where you had a radio station, my station was out there hosting it. It doesn't matter whether it was in North Carolina, Atlanta, Birmingham, you name it, I was there. So yeah, but from a traditional standpoint of going to the same fireworks show every year, no. But I will tell you this, Joe, one thing early on, we were all told as children that if you hold a firecracker open in your hand like this and you light it and it blows up, it'll burn your fingers and burn your hand. Yeah. But if you close your fist around that firecracker, you won't be able to open up a can of anything for the rest of your life. It's gone. It'll blow your hand off. So the difference in knowing how to use fireworks and what has transpired in the last 25 years because of the internet is crazy, Joe. I watched some stuff before we did this show today. I was watching some YouTube videos of people who make their own fireworks. Friends, really, there are some great hobbies to do. There are some great things you can do with your time. And I'm not even judging anyone who has a hobby that I don't particularly like. But really, this one, everything I saw looked incredibly dangerous, Joe. Every one of them. Sorry, that's why they sell them in packages, with warnings on them. Don't mess with the fireworks.
Yeah, when Noah, my son, was little, there's a fireworks stand. I think there's a couple of them named after this guy, and the guy's name's Crazy Ken. And, it only opens up in July and then New Year's.
Joe,
and I'd sit there with my radio voice and I'd go, "We're going to the Crazy Ken's."
It just hit me. Every advertisement I've ever done for a 4th of July, for a fireworks stand, it was always the Crazy Bill, Crazy Uncle Ed, Crazy Ken. They're all crazy. What does that tell you?
Yeah. Here, kids, here's a box of matches and here's a bunch of fireworks. Go have fun. You're a crazy uncle. I got to tell you, though, reflectively, I was chatting with a friend of mine many years ago. I've mentioned him before, but he did all of his training. He got a PhD in forensic anthropology and worked at the body farm. And he told me a story from back in, I think it was 1983 or 82 in Benton, Tennessee. And Benton, if you don't know where that's at, it's right on the edge of the Cherokee National Forest. So if you go, you come out of Chattanooga and go due east, the little town sits literally right on the edge of the border of the national forest there. And there was a fellow over there that had like a garage, and he did all kinds of stuff. But in the back of it, he had an illegal fireworks factory. When I say factory, I'm talking, well, let me just give you the death toll. There were 11 people dead. All right. And so my friend, though, was telling me from the perspective of what they were tasked with doing is that when this thing ignited and blew up, they had to call the body farm or had to call UT forensic anthropology because the bodies were all particulated. Now we've seen.
You're going to have to explain that a little bit, Joe, because
well,
particulated is a wonderful term, but what does it really mean?
So the blast was so intense that it wasn't just merely like an amputation, like somebody having their hand blown off or their arm blown off. I'm talking about chunks of bodies, just kind of blown apart. You see this kind of thing in war. One of my dearest students, Weston Lee, and he was with, I think, the 82nd Airborne, and he was leading a platoon, and he was, they were in Iraq, and he tripped in an improvised explosive device, and it killed him. And there were so many young men and women that died, as a result of being there in theater, and so many. And we've, for years, war. We think about gunshot wounds, but the most horrific things happen relative to explosive events, detonations, that sort of thing, artillery rounds, tank rounds, bombings, those sorts of things where you take out large numbers of people, and it's also a terror device. But when you have something that, I think on the surface of it, you see all of the pretty colors, like when I'm on the boat with Kimmy and my grandbabies, and we're just floating down the river and we look up, it's kind of a weird sensation. You're not off in the distance, you look up and they're bursting. It's so entrancing, right? And so beautiful. But you don't really realize the level of lethality that is contained. And right you are, my friend, about talking about the open hand versus the closed hand, right? So that's why, for instance, in military terms, a grenade that is thrown in an open field toward an enemy, they have what's referred to as kill radius there. Within several meters of the actual explosion, there's lethality involved. And the further out you go, you'll just get harmed. That calculus changes, though, if that same grenade is detonated inside of a closed space, like a room. And it's not just the explosive action of the device itself; it's also the concussion, that wave that travels out. So it's not just merely the shrapnel that will harm people, but it's that concussive wave that goes out. It'll rip things to shreds. So if you're in a closed environment, that can happen. And Dave, I got to tell you, the case or cases, because we don't want to be disrespectful here on Body Bag, that we're talking about today actually initiates in a closed space, doesn't it?
Well, Joe, I want to back up very quickly because you were talking about what took place with an illegal fireworks operation that hired people, that 11 people were killed when it exploded, and they had to call in the body farm from UT. You mentioned Disarticulated. Why did they have to call the body farm in? I mean, because the reason I'm asking, friends, is that story is a precursor to the one we're about to tell you about.
Well, it's an excellent question, brother, and this is why, because the bodies are literally shredded. So and you'll have exposed bone and soft tissue, and as time goes on, as you're not recovering everything, I think people are under the impression that if you have an explosion or you have an event like 9/11, for instance, and that's more of a collapse with explosions, that we can just see intact bodies, and you don't. You have bodies that are literally just kind of blown to bits. Literally, we've heard that term for years and years, right? And as those bits are blown about, you can't pick up on them because you got fire involved, because fire always follows explosions. particularly in structures like this. And you won't get to those bits of tissue many times until they're in an advanced state of decomposition, or rendered down to bone. You can still go out to sites many times and still find bits that are out there. And so you need groups of people that are good at going into austere environments like these explosive scenes, fire scenes, these sorts of things, and recover what remains. You look at the Oklahoma City bombing, that recovery of those remains, Brother Dave, that didn't happen overnight. That was a months long process. Still, with 9/11, I had so many friends that were part of DMORT, for instance, a disaster mortuary response team, that were boots on the ground up there for a long, long time. I had friends that were up there for months, and they were still working the recovery because it's such a violent thing, that, when these explosions happen. I've worked explosions before. I had famously the Norco Refinery. I may have mentioned that in the past. The Shell Norco Refinery in South Louisiana. I actually witnessed the blast. I'd stopped to get gas one night, and I'd been in the Army. I'd been around tanks and been on the firing range with tanks. Not a tanker myself. I was in intelligence, but the unit that I was part of, an armored cav unit, you go there and you feel this eruption. And Dave, the Norco blast itself was something I had never experienced because I was out working a caves, and I could look across the swamp marsh out toward Norco, Louisiana, which is west of New Orleans. And I literally was standing at a gas pump, and I saw a brilliant flash. And then all of a sudden, the wave hit me, blew me back like this. It was 23 miles from the French Quarter. And did you know that refinery sits right on the Mississippi River? That blast wave traveled down the Mississippi River. It dispersed in the French Quarter and blew out windows in buildings that were 200 and 300 years old. The buildings adjacent to the refinery, foundations were cracked.
Wow.
Imagine that. Concrete slabs just and this is off property from, and so these fellows had been in a room called the cat cracker room. And I think I'm going to get this wrong. Forgive me for those that are in the petroleum industry, but it converts you're converting, I think, kerosene or one of these things. It's superheated. And Dave, I think that we recovered a tooth.
Wow.
And there were I don't know, close to 8, 9, 10 fellows in that one room. That's how intense it was.
Well,
so I'm saying this explosions and explosives come in very many categories, but what we have to understand is that if it's a contained event, like in a room, in a closed room, they become even more violent.
Okay. Well, this happened in a rented home in Troy, Illinois, where a family. Now, I want to be very careful here because this is not an adjudicated case, okay?
Gotcha.
This is something that just happened in the last 2 months. We do have charges. We do have people under arrest, and we even have a civil case, a wrongful death lawsuit that has been filed, and there's reasons for all of this.
Yeah.
Here are the names to remember because these are the ones that died. Madeleine Maxeiner, 18. Ayden Hendrickson, 19. And Paisley Nishwitz, 12. Those 3 died in this home in Troy, Illinois. Colton Cissell is 22 years old. Colton Cissell was injured, but he got out with his life, as did his father, Kenneth Cissell, and his stepmother, Roberta Cissell. Roberta Cissell is the mother of Madeleine Maxeiner, who did not survive. Colton Cissell is an amateur fireworks person. This is an individual who's involved in clubs. There are different, I want to find the right terms for it, but you have different clubs that do different things. Some are hunting, some are chess or comic books or whatever. And Colton's in one that deals with explosives, all kinds of explosives. And while I understand the need to have a hobby, I just think there are professional boundaries that should not be crossed, and fireworks is one of them. Dealing with explosives, in the movie Walk the Line, Joe, there's a scene when they're all riding. It was the scene where they're talking about how Elvis was taking pills and the drug dealers trying to get the other guys, trying to get Johnny Cash to take some.
Yeah.
All right. And what happened? Well, one of the guys in Johnny Cash's band is making an explosive the whole way. That's his whole thing. He's all about making explosives, right? And when they land at the hotel, he puts this explosive up in the tree and they light a fuse. They're standing there looking at it. It doesn't go off right away. And they started going, what happened? And then bam, Okay, I get it. That's your jollies. It's not mine. But again, that's what I see times a billion. People died. A house was destroyed with people in it. And it was because, allegedly, the explosives were not being handled properly.
Yeah.
Meaning this was a preventable event, Joe.
Yeah, it was. And from what I understand, Cissell had been involved also with Tannerite.
Yeah.
Tannerite, for folks that are not familiar with it is not, and I'll get into the categories in just a second, but just give me a little rope here. With Tannerite, Tannerite is not something that's used in pyrotechnics. It's actually an explosive. And Tannerite itself is not, in fact, a singular substance. It's a compound. Our government does not regulate it really well because, first off, in order to create Tannerite, you have to have two components, and when placed together, they become Tannerite. And mixed when they're separate, these two components, which is primarily like aluminum powder, they're not explosive by themselves, but when combined, and there's all kinds of videos out there. I've kind of following your lead here.
Yeah.
People will use them to do things like open up waterways. They'll blow beaver dams with them. Open up like man-made dams that are that have been there to hold back a pond, and the only way it can be initiated is high-powered rifle round. So you'll see these videos, and I urge anybody to go out and kind of take a look at it on YouTube. But they'll put these things like in a beaver dam and shoot them with like a 30-06 rifle, and the whole thing just it blows the kingdom come. So the subject in this particular case is Colton Cissell. He had already, kind of gone into this area relative to Tannerite. And it does have industrial utility. It has farm utility, all these sorts of things. But, those things many times that are meant to do jobs that we otherwise are hard-pressed to do as mere mortals, or those things that are used in order to entertain us over the holidays, like the 4th and the celebration of New Year. Sometimes those things can be the most lethal of all. Y'all, Brother Dave does this fantastic job of creating notes for a dummy like me, and he just absolutely knocks it out of the park. And he came up with a term. He threw a term on me today that I had not considered in the past in kind of our liner notes relative to what we're chatting about today. And it is, I love this phrase, Dave, commercial grade energetic materials. Kind of introduced me into this term because I think that part of the charges that have been set up with this Cissell individual, Colton Cissell, is he is using commercial grade, and that's important here. Commercial grade energetic materials. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the problem with this whole thing, Joe, is that people died. There was nobody watching out for the children. There was a 12-year-old girl that died, man. There was a young couple there, the mom's daughter. Okay. I'm just blown away by the lack of respect for mankind, the love you have for your children and your stepchildren and their friends and their boyfriends and girlfriends. I mean, how do you as an adult check your brain at the door and allow this to take place in your home? That's all I'm saying. Look, man, I can be the biggest idiot in the world, Joe. I can. But there are just certain things you don't play with, and you learn early. Don't play with fire. And if you start playing with explosives and you're 22 and your dad is encouraging you to do these things and allowing you to set up, in a rented home, I'm sorry, there's nothing good that comes out of this. We have schools for these things. You can learn how to handle it. You can get a license to handle these things. You can register, get permits and things, because you know what? These things are all legislated because they kill people just like this. What frustrates me, Joe, is when people die because somebody else didn't care. That bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me too. And I've got one of my colleagues at Jack State that was, he did explosives training he would train ATF agents. And to give you an idea as to how dangerous stuff he was working with, they set this up at his office was at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville. And I know, but I'll just throw this out there. NASA tests its rockets at this same location. Does that give you an idea of how vast this place is? It has to be done in isolation. And of course, the ATF deals with all manner of explosives. That's actually in their name, the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and explosives. And when you think about what he had brought to bear, and, back to this idea of energetic materials, there's actually 3 separate categories. And I think it's really important for us to understand just from a scientific standpoint and how we would look at this forensically. There's within energetic materials 3 categories. So we've got explosives, which is kind of obvious. I mentioned Tannerite just a moment ago. There's TNT, there's dynamite. You've got a multiplicity of plastic explosives that are out there, things like C4 that's used commonly in military. We have propellants, which are things that drive projectiles. Even just everyday bullets. Okay, here contained in, people will refer to this as powder. Is actually that's contained in here that causes the round to go down range. It's actually referred to as a propellant. It's unstable. It's unstable to the point that when this is tapped off, this cap on the bottom of it, when this is tapped off, it ignites the propellant in here and sends this down range. And then the third category are actually pyrotechnics. And so these are things that create pretty colors, right? Hollywood uses them, to blow things up or give the impression that things are blown up.
Right.
Balls of fire come out, those sorts of things. And it's the same thing with fireworks demonstrations. So this young man had acquired multiple of these compounds within this domicile that. Yeah. Am I correct in saying he was working like out in the garage with
He
this?
was.
And
That's the problem with all of this, is that this home, and I don't know how big the explosion was, just big enough that 3 people died, others were injured, including Colton Cissell. He was injured in this. But it appears that he'd been handling the explosives, and I want to point this out because I'm very careful on this. He was doing it as a hobby related to making fireworks and explosive devices, not for employment. And this is part of the police report, not for employment, but or any authorized, official capacity. Authorities allege he was manufacturing, storing, and experimenting with explosive materials at the family home. A lot of us want to think, okay, maybe it wasn't inside the home. Maybe it was in a garage. Maybe it was somewhere off site. What do you think?
Well, what I'm understanding is there's a primary site within the garage, Dave.
Yeah.
But hold on to this number, because apparently there was close to 1,000 pounds of explosive dispersed throughout this home. And the thing about it is, this is catastrophic in the sense that once something ignites like this, if it is adjacent to something else that can be ignited, it very well might. I'm wondering, when I'm thinking about processing a scene like this from a forensic standpoint, because it's one thing to go out onto a scene where you've had an event occur and you're working it to document it, and those things that we talk about, photography and collection of evidence and all that. But what if there's something else that is contained therein that you're not aware of, maybe beneath your feet, something that can be triggered, and then the personnel that are within the house, it goes off again. It reminds me of Eric Rudolph in the sense that I can't remember if it was Birmingham or Atlanta at the abortion clinic. And the reason I can't remember, I'm going to do it a disservice, but I do know this: there was one device that he had set up. And for those that don't remember Eric Rudolph, he's the guy, the Olympic park bomber in Atlanta for the 1996 Olympics, which is the case that I work. And also he was responsible for the bombing in Birmingham. There was another bombing or two bombings in Atlanta, I think. But you have these things called secondary devices that can go off. And it's that feeling that you have when you show up to a scene, something has exploded, and you're not thinking there's going to be another explosion. Now, I'm not conflating this kid to a terrorist in that sense, but what I am saying is that you're always, if one thing has exploded, there is always a potential for something else to explode. And plus, this kid is a hobbyist. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is not like he works for a demolition company.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to the demolition of a building? It's really something to see. But the engineering that just goes into the demolition itself, these guys are highly, highly trained. They understand how to handle explosives. And the same thing with pyrotechnic companies. These people work with these all the time. And, they go out and they set them up, and there's certain safety regulations they have to abide by. And they understand what they're doing. But Dave, you mentioned something just a second ago that the police have kind of let the cat out of the bag with this, where they said he's experimenting. You're experimenting in a house with explosives occupied by others?
That's my whole point, is that with what we're dealing with, and a lot of it just goes down to the nitty gritty here, of that it was in as you referred to, a domestic domicile, meaning this is where people go. Our home is our safe place, right? Yeah. And you've got mom and dad, you've got a son, you've got daughters, you got a daughter's boyfriend who was spending the night, you got others, and yet you've got 1,000 pounds of explosives all around this area. Not by a professional, by a 22-year-old who has a thing for explosives and is learning and creating his own. That's the part that really gets to me when you realize that this 22-year-old Colton Cissell was doing this in a home rented by his dad and his wife and his stepmom. So, that's an authority figure giving you the ability to do this in his home. And I don't see how these things turn out well. Joe, if you have guns in your home, you are responsible for keeping those guns put up where they cannot be misused by children who don't know how to properly use a gun. It's our responsibility as adults. Well, the same thing is true here. Who thinks it's smart to have explosives all around your home? Even if, you mentioned you got to put different explosives together to create something sometimes.
Yeah.
I get it. And that's what he was doing, learning how to build things, I guess, And again, I'm not dogging out what anybody does for a living. I just don't think having explosive things around your home is the right way to live if you want to continue living. It is a fast way to die in a hole in the ground created by the explosives because they're not being handled properly, which is what happened here. Joe, when this case first happened, I thought it was a personal attack against somebody. I thought somebody had built a device and had planted it and blew it up. I thought this was a domestic violence thing that just went too far. It was, revenge or something. That's what I thought when we first opened this up. That's what I thought we were dealing with. And my first thought was the story you told me about the 11 people who died in a fireworks place. And I thought, how much worse was that? Until I dug into this and realized all the things that went wrong leading up to the explosion, Joe. It wasn't revenge. It was irresponsibility.
Well, one of the stories that's kind of come out, relative to this is that there was an awareness on the part of the dad and I guess maybe the stepmother, because Colton allegedly told one of these parties, this is alleged, if Family Children Services comes to the home, don't let them go into the garage or my bedroom. Well, I guess based upon that, Dave, I'd like to know, and I don't know that we have the answer yet because this case is so fresh, it has not been adjudicated. But one of the big questions I think I would like to have an answer for is why would Family and Children's Services be coming to this domicile? I don't understand that. What specifically are the dynamics of this family group? And, just kind of add a little spice to it. What's the dynamic of the family group that is going to knowingly allow illegal fireworks to be constructed inside of a house? It's upside down. I don't understand.
The one reason I'm glad you wanted to do this show is a warning. Okay. If you or your family or you have somebody that that is messing around with fireworks, I don't say discourage them from doing it, just discourage them from doing it like this. Okay, get the proper training, get the proper, go through the proper education so that you don't kill yourself and the people you love. In this case, Joe, look at the charges, okay? The people who died in this, Madeleine Maxeiner at 18 years old, her mother, Roberta Cissell, okay? She is Colton Cissell's stepmother, biological mother of Madeleine Maxeiner. Now, Madeleine's boyfriend, Ayden Hendrickson, was there. He was spending the night. He's 19. He's gone too. Paisley Nishwitz. Paisley's 12. Now, I tried to find this out, and I told you ahead of time. I don't know. There are reports that she was in the custody or the responsibility of either Colton Cissell or Kenneth Cissell. I don't know why. I do not know why, because I'm going to be honest with you, when you're dealing with children like that at that age, you don't know their situation because it could be any number of things. But she was there, and she could be a blood relative. We don't know because of her age. We only know her name because it was printed up in the reports on this particular story. I'm going to assume that Paisley was there under Kenneth Cissell's
Gotcha.
parentage. That's what I'm thinking based on what we're saying. And I think
that they were scheduled for a visit from Family and Children's Services because the way it reads out is that, after Colton had warned the mother, the stepmother, don't go in there, there was an indication that the Assistant State's Attorney General, Audrey Podla, this was argued a week before the explosion that actually occurred, that they were going to have to go out there and do a check because apparently they were coming to conduct a home check to see so that a relative could be placed in their custody. And what an interesting, kind of turn of events here. What if they had been able to get in there and see the environment? And first off, most people, I got to tell you, I've known a lot of workers that work for Family and Children's Services, and most of the time they walk around and they'll go to a home and they'll check level of cleanliness. They'll see if, there are firearms out, or, they'll see if there's dishes in the sink. if clothes have
Don't
been
come
put
to my
away.
house.
But
It's
you know,
just a mistake.
they don't walk through. I would be shocked if they even knew,
Yeah.
you know, if they walked into a garage, if they knew what the
Oh
components,
yeah.
pyrotechnic components were. You know, they might just look at it and see it on a workbench and just walk right by it. But apparently, according to these reports, Colton had at least enough of awareness to know that, and here's the big thing, that it's wrong. You're not supposed to have it there. But yet here we are. Dave, what do they finally wind up charging him with
Well, okay.
relative to this
Here's the
case?
catch, Joe. Before we get to those charges, follow me here.
Yeah.
This happens early in the month of April, and there are no charges right away.
Oh,
It's being investigated. Finally, a man named Robert Maxeiner. Okay, his daughter Madeleine, the 18-year-old girl who died in this explosion.
right.
Robert Max, the ex-husband of Roberta Cissell, who is the mother of Madeleine, stepmother of Colton. Okay, follow this here. You got the biological father of Madeleine. He files a civil lawsuit, and he names Colton Cissell, Roberta Cissell, Kenneth Cissell, and by the way, he actually named the owner of the home who rented the home to the Cissells, and he filed a civil suit, a wrongful death lawsuit. This happened before the police made any charges. There were no arrests made at that point. They were still trying to figure out what happened, but I think enough information was known among individuals that were talking about this. Again, you know, Colton was injured. He didn't escape without injury. But Robert Maxeiner, he had his fill. He was done waiting, so he filed a wrongful death lawsuit. Now, this is where it got interesting, because it was after he filed the civil suit, police were forced to pick up the speed. Now, I don't, you know, Joe, you and I've watched enough investigations to know that it's not always wise to push the investigators, because you could cost yourself a conviction later on. Sometimes it's better step by step building the evidence. Remember, there is no statute of limitations on murder, okay?
Yeah.
And I don't know all the ins and outs of the personalities here, but you know, whenever you're dealing with former spouses and things like that and the death of a child, this is going to be ugly. But after the civil suit was filed, police charges came in. Colton Cissell was charged with 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 count of possession of explosives or explosive incendiary devices, 1 count of endangering the life or health of a child, and 1 count of possession of explosive material without a license. Kenneth Cissell and Roberta Cissell were both charged with 1 count of endangering the life or health of a child. And those charges came after the civil suit was filed.
Well, there's going to be, from a forensic standpoint, this case is going to offer up a harvest, a trove of information. And kind of let me break this down to you, how this is going to happen. First off, with all of the decedents, when you're talking about blast injuries, when these substances, these compounds ignited, okay, not only do they have a blast wave that comes out, you know, that kind of concussive wave that comes out that does a lot of destruction. Anything that is in between that blast and that wave that travels out suddenly becomes a projectile. Okay. And so, and even, let's just say you're talking about a wall where you know, that sheetrock, you've got studs, you know, running up, standard wall that's within a ranch style home. Those 2x4s, the studs that are in there, suddenly they'll fragment, and those little splinters are traveling through the air. I've had cases where we have had explosions where you'll find wood embedded into victims' nails. I even remember with the one victim that we had at the Olympic Park bombing. She was killed, I think, either by sheet metal or a wood screw that actually caught her in the corner of her eye, traveled to the back of her head. But in addition to that, her arm was fractured right here. It was almost completely amputated. And again, that's the blast wave when that explosion occurred. Same thing in this home, and they'll all be a little bit different depending upon where they were positioned. What's fascinating is that when you have an explosive event, if there are no, and they'll use this term in forensics sometimes, kind of an old-timey term, they'll refer to it as missiles. They'll say missiles are traveling through the air, particularly older forensic pathologists will say that. So if anything is projected or is a missile that's traveling through the air and it targets a body, you'll pick up on that. But it's not merely that. You have this blast wave. So you might have a body that is adjacent to another one. They're both going to be deceased. One might be riddled with shrapnel, okay, or these projectiles that are gone out. The other might not have any defects in the body at all, but they've got incredible internal injuries in the head, the chest, where they're being slammed like this. And so it has a lot to do with the orientation of the individual relative to where the blast was, where it started, and where that wave traveled out from. One of the other things they're going to be doing, and I'm going to be fascinated about Colton Cissell as well, because, when you're handling these explosives, guess what happens? That residue travels to your hands, and it's there. You know how when we do gunshot residue tests, on victims, we do it on suspects as well. Same principle, brother. We have chemical compounds that we can search for by swabbing the hands. You'll find it on clothing, particularly in an environment where somebody is creating explosives. You can find it on the clothing of other people that occupy that space. Find it on the floor, And then we have to also calculate the fact that not only was this an explosion, Dave, this was also a fire. And remember how I said that many times fires follow explosions, right? Yeah. So if this thing clipped a gas line in the house, or there were any other flammables around, that blast, that energy from that blast can ignite other things in the house. And the fire was kind of extensive. I'd be very curious to know, relative to the victims, how many of them were burned and were they alive? Because, with fire, we can actually determine if they were alive while the fire was burning by checking their nasopharynx area down into the bronchial tree. We can see where they've inhalated soot. We call it smoke, soot you see in the lungs. So this is, as this case continues to develop, and we're talking about a multiple death event and injury event here. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'll be very interested to see if this thing ever even goes to trial. But one more thing, I'd like to know, how in the world was he sourcing these materials? And is there a bigger group out there that he's affiliated with that are also creating these devices, these pyrotechnics in their home? If they are, trust me, they're going to be on the radar of the ATF. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.